Did you know that Julius Caesar and Cleopatra banged? That's right. Julius Caesar and Cleopatra banged.
Sir, this is a Wendy's.
Okay, so they obviously don't appreciate cool historical facts at Wendy's, but I know you guys appreciate them. So in this video, I'm going to give you guys a crazy list of historical facts that will make you question history. By this, I mean historical facts that you didn't know happened at the same time. For example, not only did Cleopatra and Julius Caesar live at the same time, they also interacted. Oh, and they interacted all right. It's just crazy to think because most people often associate ancient Egypt and the Roman Empire to be completely different time periods, but they were both such long-lasting civilizations that there was a little overlap. And let me tell you, there was a little overlap. Speaking of overlap, did you know that Martin Luther King Jr. and Anne Frank were born in the same year? I didn't, but even if you did, I think it's still interesting to think about how such powerful timelines happened simultaneously. To me, this is super interesting because both of their stories are well studied and brought up in the context of mid-20th century struggles of justice. Although, even though they were born in the same year, at least for myself personally, and I'm assuming others as well too, their stories are associated with completely different time frames when, realistically, the civil rights movement was only 10 years after World War II ended.
This is America.
Actually, only 9 years, which is just crazy. Speaking of crazy, this fact literally blew my mind when I learned it. If you are 52 years old, then you have lived for 1% of all of recorded history. This sounds fake, but let me break it down. Recorded human history only dates back to 5,000 to 5,200 years ago, which means that if you take 1% of all of recorded human history, that's 52 years. If you're 52 years old, or maybe you have a family member or a friend who's 52 years old, let them know that, hey, your life is 1% of all of recorded human history. It's just cool. This is almost more of a math equation than a historical fact, but I thought I'd throw it in because it's definitely a mind bender. Okay, next up, we have one of my favorite facts on this entire list. Did you know that sandwiches are only 14 years older than the United States of America? Yeah, the sandwich as we know it today was invented in 1762 by John Montagu, the 4th Earl of Sandwich. This was just 14 years before the Declaration of Independence was signed in 1776. Now, you could take this one of two ways. You could either be shocked how old sandwiches are, or you could be shocked how young sandwiches are. Personally, I thought sandwiches were way older. Like, I thought medieval kings were eating on sandwiches on the regular. For how simple sandwiches are, I'm honestly shocked it took this long for them to become a staple item, or even to be invented in their current form. On the other hand, though, I totally get why you may be surprised how old sandwiches are, especially that they're so old that they predate the United States of America, simply because sandwiches definitely seem like an American invention. Either way, though, I just think it's hilarious that sandwiches are literally older than the United States of America. Also, let me know, did you think that sandwiches were older, like me, or did you think that sandwiches were more of a recent thing? Now, speaking of things that are way more recent than you probably think, the last execution by guillotine in France was in 1977. This is the same year that Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope was released. Now, if you've seen other videos on this topic, you might have already known this fact. But one small but critical detail that I've seen no one else mention is the fact that Christopher Lee, the actor that played Count Dooku in Star Wars Attack of the Clones, was literally there to witness that last execution. So in case you were ever curious why Willy Wonka's dad, Dr. Wonka, was such a dick in the 2005 Willy Wonka movie, just realize that he saw some shit. Okay, next up, we have a crazy example of the development of technology. Okay, so for starters, there is only a 66-year gap between the Wright brothers' first ever powered flight and the moon landing. A little kind of bonus side point of this is that the first flight actually happened before the introduction of the car. The Wright brothers' first flight was in 1903, and the introduction of the Ford Model T, the car that revolutionized the automotive industry, happened 5 years later in 1908. Okay, going back to the evolution of aviation, it's so interesting to think about that if there was a little 10-year-old little hater, let's call him Little Hater Jr., if he was there 10 years old watching the Wright brothers flight and was thinking to himself, they'll never fly. And then same hater little junior old senior now was watching the news in 1969, that 76-year-old kid would be losing his mind. Seriously though, imagine in your lifetime if you were able to witness that crazy evolution. It's amazing. You know what else is amazing? Jimi Hendrix on the guitar. He was the groovy, LSD-taken, left-handed playing guitar wizard, and he's still regarded as one of the most influential guitar players of all time. But this video is not on amazing musicians, so why do I bring up Jimi Hendrix? because he literally died before Pablo Picasso, the Spanish painter, the guy who was born in 1881. To me, it's just so crazy to think that Pablo Picasso was around more recently than Jimi Hendrix. This reminds me a lot of the first example in this video with Martin Luther King Jr. and Anne Frank, where we have two super influential figures who lived simultaneously, but no one ever makes reference of that. And I think in this example, it's even a bit more peculiar, seeing as they're both artists. I do think a large reason for this is because Pablo Picasso literally had 59 years to have a career before Jimi Hendrix was even born, which kind of separates their timelines a bit, but it's still just so interesting to think about that Pablo Picasso lived more recently than Jimi Hendrix. On the topic of living more recently than you might have assumed, did you know that the last living witness of Abraham Lincoln's assassination was literally on live television? Samuel J. Seymour was only a 5-year-old boy when he witnessed the assassination of Abraham Lincoln at the Peterson House in Washington, D.C. Samuel appeared on the TV show I've Got a Secret in 1956, where he explains exactly what he saw. I'll link in the description for you to watch after this video that clip of the show because it's really interesting. In this clip, Samuel Seymour was 96 years old and honestly funny as hell, and unfortunately he died later that year. I'd highly recommend watching that clip, but it's just so interesting to think about that there was somebody who witnessed the death of Abraham Lincoln on television almost 100 years later. While we're talking about Lincoln, I thought I'd throw in a little bonus. The first selfie ever recorded took place 22 years before Abraham Lincoln's presidency. That selfie was taken in 1839 by Robert Cornelius, and old Abe didn't become president until 1861. I could just imagine President Lincoln being elected, sitting down in the office, and then celebrating by taking a picture of himself and thinking, maybe I invented this. Maybe I should call this a self-me, a picture of me, myself, only to be regrettably informed by his staff that that wasn't the first self-me ever. There was actually one that happened 22 years ago, and many since. But then his staff informed him that he could be the first to take a picture of something else. Wink, wink. If only they had OnlyFans back then. Anyways, the Golden Gate Bridge was completed in 1937. You know what else happened in 1937? The last Tasmanian tiger died in captivity. Now you might be asking, what is a Tasmanian tiger? And that's exactly the point. It was an extremely rare species of animal that is now extinct. Well, I guess they weren't technically always rare, just more so near the end of their existence. But regardless, the Tasmanian tiger is basically a striped dingo type of thing that was from Australia and the mainland islands of Tasmania and New Guinea. I just thought this was interesting because nowadays we don't necessarily hear about too many animals going extinct that often. So to think that we had such a prevalent species go extinct at the same time that we had such a technological feat be structured, to me at least, an interesting juxtaposition. But this is kind of random, so I threw this at the end, but I thought I'd mention it because I was like, doing this research, the Tasmanian tiger seems pretty dope. And I didn't know about it. If you guys know about it, this is probably dope. I didn't know about it, so I kind of just wanted an excuse to talk about the Tasmanian tiger. So here's a picture of a Tasmanian tiger. It's a pretty cool looking creature. But for now, that's all from me. Thank you guys so much for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, you would probably love this video on screen right now, Historical Misconceptions. Very similar, but also quite different. Let me know if I missed any interesting historical facts, and if you know any, please leave them in the comments. I love reading them. But until next time, I'll see you guys. Trust me, bro. Peace.